John 18. After Jesus had spoken these words, he crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered a garden. Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a band of soldiers and officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was about to happen to him, stepped forward and asked them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "Of those you have given me, I have lost none." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the band of soldiers, their commander, and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus and bound him. They led him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it would be better if one man died for the people. Simon Peter followed Jesus, along with another disciple. That disciple was known to the high priest, so he went with Jesus into the courtyard, while Peter stood outside. The other disciple, known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door asked Peter, "Are you also one of this man's disciples?" He replied, "I am not." The servants and officers were standing around a charcoal fire, warming themselves because it was cold. Peter was also with them, warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all Jews gather. I have said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." When he said this, one of the officers struck Jesus in the face and said, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus replied, "If I spoke wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I spoke rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him, still bound, to Caiaphas the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing and warming himself. They asked him, "Aren't you also one of his disciples?" Peter denied it and said, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Peter again denied it, and at that moment a rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early morning, but they did not enter the praetorium themselves to avoid ceremonial defilement so they could eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges do you bring against this man?" They replied, "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." But the Jews replied, "It is not lawful for us to execute anyone." This fulfilled the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die. Then Pilate went back into the praetorium, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate then said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this reason I was born and came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked, "What is truth?" After saying this, he went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no guilt in him. But it is your custom that I release one prisoner to you at Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber.